The stars looked different from this part of the galaxy. Jack Miller stood at the viewing port of the Earth Alliance vessel, Horizon, watching as they approached the Lumari home planet. Its surface glowed with soft blue light, visible even from space. "Lieutenant Miller, report to the bridge," came Captain Reed's voice over the intercom. Jack straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. After 5 years of service as a diplomatic officer, this was his first solo mission of real importance. The discovery of the Lumari civilization 3 months ago had sent waves of excitement through the Earth Alliance. An advanced, peaceful alien species with technology that rivaled humanity's own was a rare find. "Miller, good. You've reviewed the briefing?" Captain Reed asked as Jack entered the bridge. "Yes, sir. The Lumari have agreed to receive 1 human representative. I'm to establish initial diplomatic relations and assess potential for alliance." Reed nodded. "Remember, we know very little about their culture. Tread carefully." The shuttle ride to the surface was smooth. Jack watched through the window as they descended toward a city that seemed to be made of crystal and light. Buildings spiraled upward in impossible shapes, glowing from within. When the shuttle doors opened, Jack was met by a group of tall, slender beings. Their skin had a faint blue luminescence, and their eyes were large and entirely silver. They wore simple robes that seemed to flow like water. One of them stepped forward. "Welcome, human. I am Marin, royal advisor to King Torin of the Lumari. Please follow me." The royal palace was even more beautiful than the city. Halls of polished stone led to a grand throne room where a tall, imposing figure sat. King Torin's skin glowed brighter than the others, and a crown of what looked like living light hovered above his head. "So this is what humans look like," the king said, his voice deep and musical. "Smaller than I expected." Jack bowed. "On behalf of the Earth Alliance, I thank you for this opportunity too." "Yes, yes," the king waved a hand. "The formalities can wait. My daughter insisted on meeting your kind, and I have learned it is easier to indulge her curiosity than resist it." As if on cue, a side door opened, and a female Lumari entered. Unlike the others, whose skin glowed blue, hers had a subtle purple tint. Her eyes, rather than pure silver, had flecks of gold. She moved with grace that made her seem to float across the floor. "This is Princess Lyra," the king said, sounding slightly resigned. The princess approached Jack without hesitation, studying him with open curiosity. "Your species doesn't glow," she said. Her voice was like chimes in a gentle breeze. "No, Your Highness," Jack replied with a smile. "That's a unique trait of your people." "Fascinating." She reached out as if to touch his face, then stopped herself. "I hope you will tell me more about your world." The king cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Miller will be staying as our guest while our peoples learn about each other. Lyra, perhaps you can show him to the diplomatic quarters." As they walked through the crystal hallways, Lyra asked Jack dozens of questions about Earth, human biology, and culture. Her enthusiasm was infectious. "Your people have achieved much without telepathy," she said, sounding impressed. "Telepathy?" Jack asked, surprised. Lyra smiled, and suddenly Jack heard her voice in his mind. "Asterisk like this asterisk." He stumbled, nearly falling. Lyra caught his arm, concern on her face. "I'm sorry. I thought you knew." "It's all right," Jack said, regaining his composure. "Just unexpected." At the guest quarters, Lyra paused. "Tomorrow, I will show you our city. There is much for our peoples to learn from each other." As she turned to leave, Jack noticed several Lumari officials watching from a distance, their expressions impossible to read. One thing was clear: the king might have allowed this meeting, but not everyone was happy about a human in their midst. Jack would need to tread carefully indeed. But as he watched Lyra walk away, he couldn't help feeling that something important had just begun. 1 month passed quickly. Jack settled into his role as Earth's liaison to the Lumari royal court. Each day brought new discoveries about their culture, technology, and biology. But nothing fascinated him more than Princess Lyra. The gardens change colors with the seasons, Lyra explained as they walked through the Royal Botanical Sanctuary. Plants that looked like a cross between flowers and sea creatures swayed gently, their petals glowing in shades of purple and green. On Earth, our plants change colors too, but not like this, Jack said, watching as a bloom seemed to respond to Lyra's presence, brightening as she passed. Lyra smiled. They react to our emotions. My mother created this garden. Where is your mother now? Jack asked. Lyra's glow dimmed slightly. She passed to the great light 10 years ago. A victim of the fading. Jack had heard whispers about the fading among the court staff, but hadn't wanted to pry. I'm sorry. What is the fading? Lyra sat on a bench made of living crystal, a genetic disorder that has affected our people for generations. It causes our light to dim and eventually go out. But worse, it has made births rare among our people. She looked down. There have been only 12 Lumeri children born in the last 50 years. Jack sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I had no idea your people were facing extinction. It is not something we share with outsiders, she said, then looked up at him with her silver gold eyes. But I feel I can trust you, Jack. That evening, a formal dinner was held in the Great Hall. Jack noticed King Toran watching him closely as he conversed with Lyra. After the meal, the king summoned Jack to a private chamber. You spend much time with my daughter, the king said without preamble. Her Highness has been kind enough to teach me about your culture, Jack replied carefully. The king's glow pulsed. And what do you think of her? She is remarkable, intelligent, compassionate, curious. King Toran nodded slowly. Humans and Lumari are not so different, biologically speaking. Our scientists believe this is more than coincidence. Jack wasn't sure how to respond to this strange turn in conversation. My daughter has been tasked with evaluating humans as potential genetic partners, the king continued bluntly. Our studies suggest your species might be compatible with ours in ways that could address the fading. Jack felt his face grow warm. Your Majesty, I'm not sure I understand. I think you do, the king said. I do not necessarily approve, but the survival of my people takes precedence over my personal feelings. Later that night, unable to sleep, Jack sent an encrypted message to Earth Alliance headquarters, reporting on what he'd learned about the fading. He carefully omitted the king's comments about genetic compatibility. The next morning, Lyra took him to a research facility beneath the palace. Lumeri scientists in silver robes worked with advanced equipment that made Earth's technology look primitive. This is where we study the fading, Lyra explained, and where we first discovered that human DNA might be our salvation. One of the scientists approached. Your Highness, the latest tests are complete. Jack watched as they reviewed holographic displays of DNA strands, twisting and combining in complex patterns. What exactly are you testing? He asked. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. Compatibility between your genetic material and mine. When did you? Jack started, then remembered the medical examination he'd undergone upon arrival. I'm sorry we didn't tell you, Lyra said, but now you understand why your presence here matters so much. As they left the facility, Jack noticed several Lumeri nobles watching them, including a tall male with unusually bright skin. That's Prince Dorn, Lyra whispered, my cousin. He believes the throne should pass to him if I don't produce an heir. Is that likely? Jack asked. Lyra's glow pulsed in what Jack had come to recognize as the Lumari equivalent of a blush. Not if these tests prove what I hope they will. Jack felt his heart race as their hands brushed together, a small spark of static electricity jumping between their fingers. But it wasn't electricity, he realized. It was her light, reaching up to him. 2 months into his stay, Jack realized he was falling in love with Lyra. It wasn't just her beauty or her glowing skin. It was her mind, her spirit, her way of seeing the universe that made his heart race whenever she entered a room. They sat together on a high balcony overlooking the Crystal City. The 3 moons of the Lumari world hung in the sky, casting a silvery light that made Lyra's skin shimmer more brightly. "On Earth, we only have 1 moon," Jack said. "That seems lonely," Lyra replied. "Our moons are said to represent the past, present, and future of our people." She pointed to the smallest moon, which had a faint red tint. "That one represents our future. See how dim it is. Many take it as a sign of the fading." Jack hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his, her skin warm against his own. "Maybe the future isn't as dim as they think," he said softly. Lyra's eyes met his. "The tests show promising results. Human and Lumari DNA can combine in ways our scientists never thought possible." "Is that all this is to you? A scientific experiment?" Jack asked, trying to keep the hurt from his voice. Lyra's glow brightened. "No, Jack, it began that way. But now," she leaned closer, "now I find myself thinking of you even when we're apart. I feel your emotions even without trying to read them." Their first kiss was like nothing Jack had ever experienced. As their lips met, a soft light passed between them, and Jack felt a rush of emotions that weren't his own. Lyra's feelings flowed into him like a warm current. When they parted, Jack was breathless. "What was that?" "The beginning of a bond," Lyra whispered. "It's how Lumari connect with their chosen mates." The next day, Jack received a message from Earth Alliance Command. His superior officer, Commander Davis, appeared on the screen, looking concerned. "Miller, we've reviewed your reports on the Lumari genetic situation. While we sympathize with their plight, there are concerns about your closeness to the princess." Jack kept his face neutral. "My relationship with Princess Lyra has helped build trust." "That's precisely what worries us," Davis replied. "Intelligence suggests the Lumari may be using you for genetic experimentation without fully disclosing their intentions. You are ordered to maintain professional distance." After the call ended, Jack sat in silence. Were his feelings for Lyra real, or had he been manipulated? That evening, Prince Dorn confronted Jack in a palace corridor. 2 Lumari guards flanked him, their hands on crystal weapons at their belts. "Human," Dorn said, his voice cold. "You dishonor our royal house with your presence. The princess may be blinded by scientific curiosity, but others see you for what you are, a genetic sample, nothing more." Jack stood his ground. "I think Princess Lyra can decide for herself what I am to her." Dorn's glow pulsed angrily. "The Royal Council has concerns about your influence. The king may tolerate you, but remember your place." Later, Jack found Lyra in the garden. She rushed to him, alarmed. "I felt your distress. What happened?" Jack told her about both conversations. "Are there things you haven't told me, Lyra? About why I was really chosen to come here?" Tears like droplets of light formed in her eyes. "You were chosen because your genetic profile showed the highest compatibility with mine. But what has grown between us, that was never planned?" She took his hands in hers. "The Council fears what we feel for each other. They wanted clinical results, not love." "Is that what this is?" Jack asked, his heart pounding. "Love." Lyra's glow brightened until she seemed to shine from within. "For my people, when the light grows stronger in someone's presence, there is no denying what it means." She drew him close. "I love you, Jack Miller. Against all wisdom and duty and tradition, I love you." As they embraced, Jack saw Prince Dorn watching from a window, his face twisted with rage. In that moment, Jack knew their troubles were only beginning. 3 months passed since Jack first arrived on the Lumari homeworld. His daily routine now included morning meetings with Earth officials, diplomatic duties in the afternoon, and evenings spent with Lyra. Despite warnings from both sides, their relationship had only grown stronger. Jack waited in the royal garden for Lyra to arrive for their evening walk. The glowing plants seemed to sense his presence now, brightening slightly when he passed. He had grown to love this alien world with its 3 moons and crystal cities. When Lyra finally appeared, Jack knew immediately that something was different. Her usual purple glow had a new intensity, brighter than he had ever seen before. She seemed to float rather than walk, her face shining with a mix of emotions Jack couldn't read. "Jack," she said softly, taking his hands in hers, "I have news." They sat together on a bench, surrounded by swaying, luminescent flowers. Lyra took a deep breath. "Our scientists have been monitoring the changes in my body since we began our connection." Jack nodded. The Lumari were always studying something, especially their own biology in relation to the fading. Lyra's eyes, flecked with gold, met his. They found something unexpected, something that has never happened before in our history. Jack felt his heart begin to race. "What is it? Are you all right?" The alien princess smiled and said, "I'm pregnant with your child." The world seemed to stop. Jack stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. That's impossible," he finally managed to say. "Our species are from different planets, different evolutionary paths." Lyra's glow pulsed with excitement. "That's what makes it a miracle. The genetic compatibility tests were correct, but no one expected actual conception to be possible." Jack stood up, pacing in front of the bench. "A human Lumari child. What will it be like?" "The scientists don't know for certain," Lyra admitted, "but they believe the child will have traits from both of us. Perhaps my telepathic abilities, perhaps your human adaptability." "Have you told your father, the king?" Lyra's glow dimmed slightly. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. But news travels fast in the palace. The scientists report directly to the Royal Council." As if on cue, a group of Lumari guards appeared at the garden entrance, led by Marin, the royal advisor. "Lieutenant Miller," Marin said formally, "your presence is requested by King Toran." Immediately. The throne room was filled with members of the Royal Council. Prince Dorn stood at the king's right hand, his face triumphant. King Toran himself looked troubled, his usually bright glow muted. "Is it true?" the king asked without preamble. Jack stood tall. "Yes, your majesty. Princess Lyra is carrying my child." Murmurs filled the hall. Some sounded shocked, others angry. "This was not the intention of our scientific inquiry," Prince Dorn said loudly. "A half-breed cannot be the heir to the Lumari throne." "Silence," the king commanded. He turned to Jack. "This development changes everything. The council must debate the implications." Before Jack could respond, his communication device chimed with an urgent message. Commander Davis's face appeared, looking grim. "Miller, report to the shuttle bay immediately. You're being recalled to Earth." "Sir, I can't leave now," Jack protested. "This isn't a request, Lieutenant. Earth Alliance has been informed of the situation. The diplomatic implications are beyond your authority. A team is coming to extract you." The call ended, leaving Jack standing between two worlds that were suddenly pulling him apart. Lyra entered the throne room, her glow bright despite the tension. She moved to Jack's side and took his hand publicly, an act that caused more murmurs among the council. "My child will be born," she announced clearly. "Half human, half Lumari, the first of a new hope for our people." Prince Dorn stepped forward. "This abomination threatens our entire way of life. I call for an emergency session of the council to determine succession rights." As guards began to surround both Jack and Lyra, the king raised his hand. "Enough," he said wearily. "Lieutenant Miller will be returned to his people for consultation. Princess Lyra will remain under palace protection. Until we understand what this means for our future, no hasty decisions will be made." Jack looked at Lyra, fear gripping his heart. "I won't leave you," he whispered. "You must," she replied softly, "but find a way back to us. To our child." Jack paced the small meeting room aboard the Earth Alliance flagship Defender. For 2 weeks, he had been questioned by scientists, diplomats, and military officials about his relationship with Princess Lyra and the unprecedented pregnancy. "Lieutenant Miller, please sit down," said Dr. Helen Reed, the chief cynobiologist. Her kind eyes showed more curiosity than judgment. "We're not your enemies here." Jack sat reluctantly. "Then let me return to the Lumari homeworld. Lyra needs me." "We first need to understand what's happening," Dr. Reed explained, activating a holographic display. "Look at these DNA patterns." The display showed 2 strands of DNA, one human, one Lumari, slowly merging together. "By all known laws of biology, this shouldn't be possible," Dr. Reed continued. "Yet something in human DNA perfectly complements the damaged sections of Lumari genetic code, the parts affected by the fading." Another scientist, Dr. Morris, nodded enthusiastically. "It's as if our species were designed to heal theirs. Or perhaps," Dr. Reed suggested, "our evolution was always meant to converge at this point." Jack leaned forward. "What does this mean for Lyra? For our child?" "Based on the data the Lumari shared, the pregnancy appears stable," Dr. Reed said. "The child will likely have characteristics of both species, perhaps even advantages neither species possesses alone." A door opened, and Admiral Parker entered the room. His stern face showed no emotion as he addressed Jack. "The Alliance Council has reached a decision. The diplomatic implications of this pregnancy are too significant to ignore. You will remain here until we establish proper protocols." "You mean I'm a prisoner?" Jack said bitterly. "We prefer valuable asset," the Admiral replied. "The Lumari aren't the only ones facing extinction, Miller. Earth's own population has been declining for decades due to decreasing fertility rates. If human Lumari breeding is viable, it could offer solutions for both our peoples." Jack stood up angrily. "My child is not a science experiment." Meanwhile, on the Lumari homeworld, Lyra sat in the Royal Medical Chamber as scientists monitored the life growing inside her. Her glow had intensified, taking on a new hue that mixed her purple light with flickers of warm gold. "Remarkable," said the chief medical officer. "The fetus shows stable integration of both genetic codes. And look here." He pointed to a scan showing tiny pulses of light within Lyra's womb. "It already generates its own light." Prince Dorn watched from the doorway, his face dark with resentment. The council remains divided. Many believe this hybrid should never rule. Lyra turned to him, her eyes flashing. "This child carries the future of our people. Our scientists now believe human DNA contains the key to curing the fading completely." "At what cost?" Dorn demanded. "Our pure bloodline, our traditions, our very identity as Lumari." Before Lyra could answer, King Torin entered the chamber. He had grown noticeably weaker in recent weeks, his glow dimming in a way that alarmed the court. "Father," Lyra said, rising to greet him. The king moved slowly to her side. "The reports are true, then. This child may save our people." "The genetic analysis shows promise beyond anything we imagined," the medical officer confirmed. "This hybrid combination appears to repair the damaged sequences in our DNA." The king turned to Lyra. "I have had a message from Earth. Their leaders wish to establish a formal alliance with this child as a symbol of unity between our worlds." Lyra's face brightened. "And Jack, will they return him to us?" King Toran looked troubled. "There are complications. Some humans fear what this means. Groups have formed protesting any alliance with aliens. They call for Lieutenant Miller's return to Earth permanently." Lyra closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind across the vast distance of space. Since the pregnancy began, her telepathic abilities had grown stronger. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she could almost feel Jack's presence. "I will find a way back to you." She heard his thoughts, faint but determined. "Wait for me." "He will return," Lyra said confidently, opening her eyes. "Nothing will keep us apart." not distance, not politics, not even the space between worlds. The king looked at his daughter with newfound respect. Then we must prepare for what comes next. Both our peoples stand at the edge of a new era, with your child at its center. Jack stared at the ceiling of his quarters aboard the Defender. Though not officially a prisoner, he hadn't been allowed to leave the ship in over a month. His mind constantly reached out to Lyra, hoping somehow she could feel him across the vast emptiness of space. A soft knock at his door broke his concentration. Dr. Reed entered, looking around nervously. "We don't have much time," she whispered, closing the door. "Admiral Parker plans to move you to a research facility on Earth tomorrow. Once there, you may never be allowed to return to the Lumari." Jack sat up. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what they're doing is wrong," she said, placing a small device on the table. "This will help you bypass the shuttle bay security. There's a diplomatic vessel leaving for the Lumari homeworld in 30 minutes. "Why help me?" Jack asked, grabbing his few possessions. Dr. Reed smiled sadly. "I believe in science, Lieutenant, but not at the expense of humanity. That child deserves its father." Meanwhile, on the Lumari homeworld, chaos erupted in the royal palace. King Torin had collapsed during a council meeting, his light flickering dangerously dim. The royal physicians worked desperately to stabilize him as Princess Lyra watched, her hands protectively cradling her growing belly. "The fading accelerates in him," one physician said grimly. "He may not have much time." Prince Dorn seized the opportunity, calling an emergency session of the Royal Council. With the king incapacitated and Princess Lyra's condition compromised, Dorn announced to the assembled nobles, "Leadership must pass to someone who can maintain our traditions and purity." "The king still lives," Marin, the royal advisor, objected, "and Princess Lyra remains the rightful heir." "And heir carrying a half-human child," Dorn countered. "Our laws never anticipated such a situation. I move that the council appoint me as regent until this matter is resolved." From the back of the chamber, Lyra entered, her glow now so bright that some had to shield their eyes. "You speak of tradition and purity, cousin," she said, her voice carrying unusual power. "Yet you ignore the most ancient prophecy of our people, that when the 3 moons align and new light is born, the fading will end." Whispers spread through the chamber. The prophecy was well known but had been dismissed as legend by many. "The alignment comes in less than a month," Lyra continued, "as does the birth of my child. New light, born of 2 worlds." Dorn scoffed. "Convenient interpretations of old stories won't save your claim to the throne." "Perhaps not," came a new voice from the chamber entrance. "But I might have something to say about it." Jack Miller stood in the doorway, still wearing his Earth Alliance uniform, though it was wrinkled from his journey. Guards moved to intercept him, but Lyra raised her hand. "My bondmate has returned to us," she said, her face radiant, "as I knew he would." The council erupted in confusion as Jack strode across the chamber to Lyra's side. When their hands touched, a visible spark of light passed between them, causing many of the Lumari to gasp. "The bond light," Marin whispered. "It hasn't been seen in generations." Dorn's face twisted with rage. "This human has no standing here. Guards, remove him." But the guards hesitated, uncertain which authority to follow. Taking advantage of the confusion, Dorn signaled to several nobles who drew concealed weapons. "If the council will not act, I will," Dorn declared. "For the purity of our bloodline, the human and its offspring must be eliminated." As the armed nobles moved forward, Lyra suddenly clutched her stomach, doubling over in pain. Jack caught her as she stumbled, alarm on his face. "Lyra, what's wrong?" Her eyes met his, filled with wonder despite the pain. "The child, it feels what's happening. It's reaching out." A pulse of brilliant light erupted from Lyra, expanding outward in a gentle wave that touched everyone in the chamber. As it passed through each person, they froze, their eyes widening. "Asterisk, we belong together. All of us, asterisk, The thought wasn't spoken but felt by everyone present, accompanied by emotions of peace and unity. When the light faded, even Dorn looked shaken. The armed nobles lowered their weapons, confusion on their faces. What was that? Dorn demanded. Lyra straightened, strength returning to her face. That was the voice of the future. Our child already possesses telepathic abilities stronger than any Lumari in our history. Above the palace, the three moons of the Lumari world began to move into alignment, just as an Earth Alliance fleet appeared in orbit, their weapon systems active. The royal palace shook as Earth Alliance ships took defensive positions around the Lumari homeworld. On the surface, chaos reigned. Prince Dorn's supporters clashed with those loyal to Princess Lyra, while ordinary citizens looked to the sky in fear. In the king's chambers, Lyra sat beside her father's bed, holding his weakening hand. Jack stood protectively at her side. "The Earth ships," the king whispered, his glow barely visible now. "They've come for you." "Not exactly," Jack explained. "They followed my shuttle. Admiral Parker believes I was kidnapped." A young guard burst into the room. "Your Highness, Prince Dorn has taken control of our defense systems. He threatens to fire on the Earth vessels if they don't retreat." Jack's face paled. That would start a war neither side could win. Lyra stood, her pregnant form radiating light that seemed to strengthen with each passing moment. "Take me to the communication center. I must speak with both sides." As they hurried through the crystal corridors, Lyra suddenly stopped, gasping. "Jack, the baby. Is something wrong?" he asked, panic in his voice. She smiled through her discomfort. "No, it's time. The child comes now, with the alignment of the moons." Jack looked between Lyra and the young guard in alarm. "We need to get her to the medical center." "No," Lyra said firmly. "The communications center first. Our peoples stand on the edge of war. Our child must not be born into conflict." At the communications center, they found Prince Dorn giving orders to fire on the Earth ships. When he saw Lyra, her glow now almost blindingly bright, he stepped back in shock. "Stop this, Dorn," Lyra commanded. "Open a channel to the Earth fleet." Something in her voice, power beyond her normal authority, made the technicians obey without question. On the main screen, Admiral Parker's stern face appeared. "This is Admiral Parker of Earth Alliance. Return Lieutenant Miller immediately or—" "Admiral," Jack interrupted, stepping into view. "I wasn't kidnapped. I came back of my own free will." Lyra moved forward, her light causing the video feed to adjust its brightness. "People of Earth, people of Lumari, hear me. What happens today will shake the future of both our worlds." As she spoke, another wave of pain hit her. Jack supported her as she continued. "The child of our worlds comes now, as our ancient prophecy foretold. A new light born when the three moons align." Admiral Parker's expression softened slightly. "Princess, our scans show unusual energy readings from your planet. What's happening down there?" Before she could answer, Lyra cried out, dropping to her knees. Light poured from her body, forming a cocoon around her and Jack. "Everyone back," Jack shouted, cradling Lyra as the light intensified. Inside their bubble of light, time seemed to slow. Jack held Lyra's hands as her body released a final surge of energy. Between them, a small form materialized. A baby with skin that glowed with swirling patterns of blue, purple, and gold. Its eyes, when they opened, contained all the colors of both worlds. "A girl," Jack whispered in awe. The baby reached up, touching both their faces simultaneously. In that moment, every being on the planet and every person aboard the Earth ships heard the same gentle thought. "Asterisk, I am of both worlds, and neither. I am the bridge asterisk." The cocoon of light expanded, growing to encompass the entire palace, then the city, then the whole planet. It reached out to the Earth ships, connecting everyone in a moment of perfect understanding. When the light receded, Lyra held her daughter in her arms, Jack's arm around them both. On the communication screen, Admiral Parker and his crew looked stunned. What? What was that? The Admiral asked. That was the solution to the fading. Lyra explained, her strength returning rapidly. Our daughter's unique genetics have released an energy that is already healing our people. In the king's chamber, King Torin sat up in bed, his glow stronger than it had been in years. Throughout the palace, throughout the city, Lumari, who had been dimming, suddenly found their light returning. Prince Dorn fell to his knees before Lyra and the child. The prophecy. It was true. 1 week later, representatives from Earth and Lumari gathered in the Great Hall. King Torin, fully recovered, presided over a historic ceremony. Today, we recognize not just a new heir to the Lumari throne, but a new beginning for both our peoples, the king announced. Jack and Lyra stood together, their daughter in Jack's arms. The child's glow had settled into a steady radiance that combined the best of both species. We name her Aurora, Lyra announced, first of a new generation that will unite our worlds. As the 3 moons shone through the crystal ceiling, casting their light on the first human Lumari family, Jack thought about how far he had come from that first diplomatic mission. He had found love across the stars and helped create a miracle that would save 2 worlds. Aurora reached up and touched his face, sending a simple thought. *family*. Jack smiled. Some journeys led farther than anyone could imagine.